Welcome viewers to my next episode of the Thought Leader Way, where I'm bringing together thought leaders from across the globe in various areas to share their experiences on becoming a thought leader. What has their journey been towards becoming a thought leader? This is a precursor to my upcoming book, The Thought Leader Way. Today, I have a special guest with me, Kamales Lardi. She's a digital transformation strategist and futurist. She helps companies leverage digital disruption to create new opportunities for business and generate revenue. She has over 20 years of experience in management consulting. So she's established Lardi and Partner Consulting Group in 2012, and she has advised many companies across various industries such as UBS, Swiss Federal Railways, Pfizer, Bonus Card, among others. She is a visiting fellow and chairperson of the MBA Advisory Board at Durham Business School. She was recently listed in the top 10 global thought leaders and influencers in digital transformation by Thinkers 360. She's also the founder of Bloomblog, a strategic advisory and blockchain development company focused on sustainable supply chain. So welcome, Lardi. Welcome, Kamales. It's absolute pleasure having you today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, Kamales, according to you, who is a thought leader, or what does it take to become a thought leader?
This is a very interesting question. I think it's also quite subjective. From my perspective, I would say a thought leader is an opinion leader or someone who has a voice in the market in terms of a specific area of expertise and has a following for that voice, basically. For my own perspective, I would say that it's also a person who has a bold outlook in terms of sharing opinions, in terms of sharing their points of view, and being very vocal about that point of view online as well as in other forms of publications.
Okay. So with you focusing a lot on digital and transformation, and social media is a big part of digital strategy for organizations as well. So do you think with the advent of social media, you've seen the rise of a lot more of thought leaders?
Oh, for sure. I think it's become a lot easier to position yourself in the market. And social media was one of the first kind of emerging technologies or social, digital platforms that I worked with when I first started my company. So I started working on social media back in 2007, 2008. That was kind of the beginnings of, we started to see a lot more social platforms coming up. And in 2012, when I started my own company, I developed a framework for social media engagement for organizations, for corporates, basically. And at that time, there were very, very few companies that were starting to engage on these channels. Okay. And today, it's almost mainstream and quite a lot of companies are using it. So I started to develop my profile back then and for my company as well in order to get noticed in the market. And that was kind of the beginnings of creating this sort of thought leadership journey that I've been on. And a lot of that was really just focusing on adding value, sharing information, making sure that, every piece of content I shared had something in relation to the work that I was doing, content that was valuable to the target audiences that I was looking at in the market. So social media has definitely enabled a lot of people. On the other hand, there's kind of a negative side to it as well. There's a lot of noise in the market, and social media has kind of amplified the noise. True. So a lot of people have, sometimes sharing content without a discerning voice in terms of making sure that the content is correct, accurate, that it's pragmatic and doable, that it's based on sound reasoning and experience. So a lot of these kind of pros and cons that come with social media as well. So thought leadership is a real key way to stand out in the market and make sure that the right value added content and experiences get noticed as well.
That's so true. I think I was reading data point somewhere. It said on LinkedIn there are over 1 million profiles which actually have the word thought leader in them. So that way I think a lot of them are Me Too's claiming to be thought leaders. So my next question was, do you think it's easier for somebody to be a thought leader if they are part of a bigger brand, or if they are running their own firm? Because you've been there on both sides. So what do you think?
So this is actually, I think it really depends on, what the person themselves targets to do, right? So I've been in large organizations. I've worked with Zurich Insurance. I've been with Accenture, and I was in Deloitte, Switzerland as well. And a lot of times when you're in this bigger brand or within an organization, the voice of the brand tends to take priority to a certain extent. And we don't see very many thought leaders, or at least I don't follow very many thought leaders who come out of these big brands. I do follow the brands to a certain extent for the content that they post, or they produce, but not necessarily the people within the organizations. And I think this is a big missed opportunity. You do tend to see a lot more thought leaders coming out of their own personal branding, or their own entrepreneurship, or smaller businesses, really trying to position themselves. And that was also my personal journey when I left the big brand Deloitte and joined, and started my own company. One of the key things I needed was to be noticed in the market. I was doing a lot of things that was kind of on par with the consultancies, the big consultancies, but I didn't have a brand name. And so that was the first exercise for me: speaking engagements, brand building, and of course, creating this sort of thought leadership journey that I've been on. And I'm not sure if I would have gone through the same journey if I had stayed in the big brands. But I think it's definitely been a rewarding journey, and it's a missed opportunity for the bigger organizations, I would say.
Okay, interesting. So, what do you think are the fundamentals or foundations that one needs to put in place if they are starting off their journey towards becoming a thought leader?
So there are a couple of things that I can share from my own experience. I think one of the basic things is really understanding what is your area of expertise. So what would you like to stand out in terms of topics, or what kind of experiences do you stand out in? What kind of experiences do you have most, and how do you want to share that in the market? So really having a good understanding for your own key area of expertise. And for me, that was really digital and business. So these areas really collided throughout my entire professional journey. I was very, very much into digital and technology implementation, but also very embedded in business transformation, business process optimization, operations optimization, corporate strategy. So these sort of elements combined very nicely for digital transformation. And so once I started to focus, and I realized, this was the area that I'm extremely passionate about as well. The next step is really looking at who your target audience is, what kind of goal do you want to achieve in the market. And a lot of times people tend to mistaken that for a sales goal, right? I want to sell my product or service. I want to be a thought leader because I want people to acquire something from me. And I think for me, the principle is thought leadership is not about being known or selling. Thought leadership is about making a difference and adding value. And so those are the kind of principles that I have stuck with throughout the journey. And really having a good understanding for your own personality type as well. Not everyone's going to be able to stand out on social media, for example. Some people are more attuned to written content. Other people might be more, more comfortable with voice content like podcasts.
True.
So really having a good understanding for your own personal style and tone. And looking at your kind of the personal values that you want to put out there. I think this is something that, you mentioned that there are so many people on LinkedIn who position themselves as thought leaders. But I think the thing that makes certain people stand out is their own personal values coming through in the content. And my personal values are always being bold, authentic, and passionate. These are the values that I've always stood by, even when I'm working with a client or if I'm speaking on stage. These are the things that I want to portray about myself because these are my basic values. And that does tend to come out. And, it comes in a certain passion when I speak about the topic because I absolutely love working in the area that I'm in. And I think that does come through. So really having a good understanding for your area of expertise and who your target audiences are and your own kind of personal style and value system. and trying to combine that into content that makes sense. And then you go into kind of the content strategy and the channels that you want to post on, and really being consistent about posting the content and sharing content, whatever channel or format you might be using. But consistency is important. And so for me, that has been a challenge, because obviously with anyone out there, when you're extremely busy, being consistent is tough, right? So I've been able to kind of narrow down the number of channels that I use and stay consistent with those specific channels in terms of what I share and how often I share as well.
True, that's very important. So I think your thought leader way is to be bold, to be authentic, and be passionate about the area that you want to focus on. There was a very interesting point that you made, that a lot of times thought leadership, you tend to say that, okay, how do I convert it to sales? Or you have a very sales oriented approach towards thought leadership. And I've personally had this experience myself, where I've, some of the leaders that I used to work with in my earlier organizations never understood what it takes to have that thought leadership journey. So they would be very narrow-minded, focused of saying, okay, so what sales will I get out of this? So how many leads am I going to get out of this in the next month or so? So what would be your advice to organizations or leaders on how they can build a culture for thought leadership?
I think the fundamental element is really understanding the goals, what they want to achieve on those channels, right? Because it is a very specific journey. It's effort intensive in the sense that you've got to put a certain part of yourself into that journey. And if you're looking to, become a thought leader to sell something or sell a product, it's probably not the right area of focus, right? I think then you can go down the route of, online sales, branding and marketing, and those types of things, which are very effective for sales. And thought leadership, I think a byproduct of it is you do tend to sell services and products. You do tend to come out with some sort of commercial outcome. So if a person goes into that journey of thought leadership with the ultimate goal of wanting to sell or position some kind of product or service, I think that's probably not the right tool to use or not the right journey to go on. And there you can really start to look into online sales, inbound sales, marketing and branding, those types of efforts, which are very effective for sales and acquisition. For me, thought leadership really is about having an influence in the market. So driving a certain message through and making sure that you add value in the message that you're sharing, and basically having an impact on the market. So my personal goal, for example, with thought leadership is making sure that I share the experiences and the pragmatic lessons learned from digital transformation efforts with my target audiences, which are people in the business area, right? Corporates or even startups and even institutions, organizations, whatever they may be. But taking my practical daily experiences and sharing that with the wider community and showing them the journey. And I think a second goal I have is also to demonstrate kind of a form of diversity. There are very, very few women and even far less women of color in this space, particularly in Europe. And I think being a vocal member of this sort of thought leadership area is important to kind of demonstrate to people that there is diversity in this space. There are people outside of this traditional area that you would imagine, people who are diverse, people from different backgrounds. I struggle to find Asian female thought leaders in Europe who are sharing topics around digital transformation, technology, emerging technology, disruption, and these sort of topics. So this is one of my reasons as well, to put that voice out there and show kind of a different point of view. And the byproduct of that is obviously you get some kind of commercial output from it, but that's not my primary goal. And I think if you focus on value that you can bring to the market and your target audience, that can make a huge difference and an impact. It comes off more authentic, I would say.
True. Yeah, leadership, end of the day, is more about being authentic and building the trust as a personal brand or as an organization brand that you could approach for the problem that you have at hand. My next question was on the diversity aspect itself. So we know that women generally have a lot of issues breaking the glass ceiling, especially in senior leadership roles. We see very few women leaders at those positions, right? So from building thought leadership or showcasing thought leadership, how tough is it being a woman in that space? And what advice would you have for women who want to position themselves as thought leaders?
First of all, I think I would like to qualify when I speak of diversity, I think I would like to also go beyond gender diversity and really talk about diversity of backgrounds, cultures, diversity of thought, diversity of experiences as well.
True.
We tend to see not enough range of experiences, particularly if we talk about emerging technologies and business transformation. We need to have that diversity of experiences and thought in those implementations. And in terms of how difficult it is to break the barrier and become a thought leader in that space, I think with the advent of social media and all these online platforms, it has become a little bit easier. But on the other hand, it really does put a spotlight on your capabilities.
Yeah.
So if you are trying to position yourself in that space, make sure you can back it up with the experience and the knowledge and the kind of the delivery in the back end, the high quality delivery that comes with that. Because as soon as you're in that spotlight, and if you are someone from a minority or a different background, the pressure starts to compile a little bit more in terms of, can you deliver this? So you say you're a thought leader in this space. Every single meeting has to demonstrate that thought leadership, has to demonstrate that leadership to a certain extent. And so it does, sometimes it puts a little bit extra pressure, particularly, if you're a woman and you come into this space and expectations are really high and you have to kind of work doubly hard to make sure that you can back up those experiences to a certain extent. But I think it has become a lot easier in the sense that you have opportunities. My advice to anyone who's trying to kind of break the boundaries and come out in this space and stand out to a certain extent is to really be bold. Don't shy away from opportunities. Don't doubt yourself. Everything you go through, there's a process of trial and error. You've got to put yourself out there. I can very frankly tell you, I have a fear of public speaking, which is one of the reasons I went into public speaking. So take your fear head on. Yeah. And I think it puts you on your toes, right? When you're really afraid of something, you become extra prepared and you come in really determined to kind of face that fear.
Yes.
And so this was one of the things that I did. I just took it on and I was bold enough to address that. And so my biggest advice to people out there would be really be bold and push yourself to the, outside of your comfort zone, because that's where the magic happens.
That's very nicely put. So be bold, push yourself outside your comfort zone, and that's where magic happens. So it was wonderful talking to you, Kamales. Thanks for sharing your views. I'm sure the audience had a lot of learnings to take forward towards becoming a thought leader themselves. Thank you once again for your time.
Thank you for having me.